Nonverbal Communication and Behavior by Derek Milapercio and Elizabeth Olivas. Key ideas. Key ideas we will be focusing on during this presentation are as follows. Significance of nonverbal cues and behaviors, types of nonverbal cues and body language, nonverbal communication shapes perceptions, nonverbal communication is ambiguous, and that nonverbal communication varies by culture, gender, and location. Our third slide is defining nonverbal communication. Nonverbal communication is a message or feeling expressed through nonverbal sources or without words, such as facial expression, postures, eye contact, body movement, touch, space, photographs, gestures, personal appearance, vocalics, artistic depictions, and many more. In modern times, nonverbal communication can convey meaning through an action rather than a verbal understanding. This would mean that we can convey more meaning through our nonverbal cues without really expressing our feelings through words. Also, this includes implicit messages, unintentional or not. So, what that means is it's unintentional. We can't control our nonverbal cues in that sense.
Now we'll talk about the significance of nonverbal communications and behaviors. So first, nonverbal communications can help us deliver basic messages when there are language barriers. Nonverbal messages can take place of words. Nonverbal communications and behaviors can reinforce what is already being said. Nonverbal communications can convey information about our attitudes and feelings, and nonverbal communications can also complement a verbal message. Nonverbal communications shape perceptions. So it is known that we need very little time to make relatively accurate opinions of people based off their looks and behaviors about personality traits. Nonverbal communication can shape perceptions because of natural human senses. As such, humans make perceptions based on the nonverbal cues eliminated off of a person, place, or thing. Nonverbal cues could include colors, facial expression, way of dress, posture, and stuff like that. So based on all of our sources, we feel like they all agree with the fact that nonverbal communication can shape perceptions. So in the first source, which is our textbook, The Process of Interpersonal Communication, it supports that fact by saying nonverbal communication contributes a great deal to shaping perceptions. In our next source, Does Body Language Communicate Personality? By Andrew Cole, this article supports that by saying from research, we know that the way we interpret someone's body language influences our response to it. In another source that we have, Perceptions of Nonverbal Communication by Kimberly Van Wielden, it is stated that perception is directly linked to how conductors portray themselves through their posture, how they carry themselves, and their physical appearance. The article concludes that if a person's inner being can be projected by outward appearances, then a person's nonverbal behavior could initially affect how others perceive and respond to him or her. Next, nonverbal communication is ambiguous. So we found that our sources support each other in the aspect of nonverbal communication being ambiguous, and we definitely agree because of the many meanings any nonverbal cue could have. So based on our textbook, The Process of Interpersonal Communication, nonverbal communication has the potential to be even more ambiguous than verbal statements because there are many ways we can interpret the meaning of a nonverbal cue. The textbook goes further to establish that meaning from such cues could be misinterpreted due to social standards. All, if not most, of our sources agree that it is possible to misread nonverbal communication. Our last article from the Choral Journal states that we do associate certain personality and temperament traits with body builds, but these expectations may or may not be accurate, but they do still exist.
Gender and nonverbal behavior. In an article posted from Park Point University, one of our sources, they explain how gender can impact a person's nonverbal behavior. It states men will command and use more personal space and will also smile less. Again, these are generalizations that we are using. Women, on the other hand, will smile more, tend to stand with their arms and legs more close to their bodies other than their male counterparts. And these are, again, generalizations that people have made and under studies have found in people's genders and how different genders would convey nonverbal cues. Of course, we also must consider people with certain mental or physical disabilities, such as gender dysphoria or maybe autism, as a generalization could potentially harm such instances we come into these people. We always must be aware of the individualism and not always use these generalizations not only as fact, but to use them to generalize everybody. We also must keep in mind everyone is different. Culture and nonverbal differences. We come to associate our nonverbal responses from social interactions as a whole from our nation. Different nations or cultures will have different ways of communicating their nonverbal cues, and it is no surprise that this causes a barrier hindering other cultures from fully understanding one another. An article or prompt from a journal sourced by Harvey Taylor elaborates on the differences that nonverbal behaviors come from different nations, such as Japan and America. Two different cultures, but use fairly different nonverbal cues to convey emotion or personal differences. It stated that generally Americans tend to express their emotions nonverbally through facial expression. And this is again a generalization, while the Japanese are raised not to do so. This causes people from both sides to think mentally that the other one is disinterested or very immature. And this is because of the different nonverbal cues and cultures use. This is, again, just one example, but many nations use hand gestures or posture or facial expressions to convey completely different messages than one another. And this could be a language barrier. However, due to modern science, this has been a very progressive stance on how people communicate and how we can learn to communicate with each other without using our words. Source conclusions.
Yes.
And most, if not all of our sources we encounter all state that nonverbal communication can be negative based on previous experience or based upon culture or gender. We must keep in mind that the little things, if we are to be able to become better at identifying true meaning from nonverbal cues, if that is the choice one is going to pursue. The depth that goes into the topic of gender and culture will always generalize. Though it is helpful for understanding, it won't always help you with a personal experience or what you will go through when you're communicating nonverbal cues or picking up nonverbal cues. The sources were very informative on how to pick up and compare nonverbal interactions, but they will never really tell you how to react if such things happen to you. If we could give advice from what we have learned, it would be aware, and make sure you understand not to generalize, because nonverbal communication as a whole should not be generalized. It is all individual. Every person we meet has a different way of communicating, though it is good to use these generalizations to learn and to pick up on these cues. We must also consider we are all our own being and we all communicate differently in some way, shape, or form. This is our works cited, and if you guys have any questions, please comment down below. And we thank you for watching our presentation and have a lovely day.